The most important thing in life is not freedom, it's not liberty. And of course, spiritually, it is Christ, we know that. But what is the most physical necessity, the most physical need that we need in America and really across the world? It's access to water. Now, the point of the video today is to talk about how you don't own the water that's falling out of the sky. You don't own the water that you've paid for when it comes to a lake and pond. You don't own the creeks that go through your property. You own none of that. You don't even own the well that's pumping underneath your feet that you installed on your own property. How important is physical water? We're going to talk about a few states that are taking your necessity, taking the abundance of water away. And what does that do? It affects us, but think about your food system. How does your animals grow? How does livestock grow? How does vegetables grow for you vegans? Either way, it needs water. Let's jump into it. Guys, welcome to the Max. Thank you so very much for being here today. If you are new to the channel, go down here, press subscribe, ring the bell. It sure does help me, especially if you give us a thumbs up. It means the world to me. So we humbly ask that you do that if you like this video and our content. Our goal is to raise awareness, to prep, to understand what's going on in our world so we can have a common sense approach and have a wise understanding of how we lead our families through this crazy world. Today we're going to be talking about water. Now, you've seen my lake. You've seen my creek. I don't know. I'm gonna walk you. I didn't plan to do this, but I'm gonna walk you. Okay, you see this hay barn over here? Okay, on the edge of that hay barn right there, you see that pipe? That's water catchment. In an area that gets a lot of rain like ours, in an area that has a lake that's 7 or 8 acres that is spring fed, in an area that has a creek running across it, why would I want to water catch? In an area that we have all that, why would I want to stockpile water? You know why? Because it is the biggest necessity. Other than spiritually talking with our Lord, what is the biggest and physical need that we need in earth? Not just us as humans, the food that we eat. Without water, the food won't grow. No matter if you're growing meat or vegetables, they won't grow. Well, today we're going to talk about that. Talk about the fact that in Idaho they're doing a curtailment. Oregon, they did a curtailment. They've done it in Colorado, they've done it in California, and it is hurting the farmer. When government steps in and they start hurting what grows your food, that affects 100% of people. Without water, without growing vegetation, without growing livestock, we starve. They can try to print as much food as they want. They can try to GMO and modify as much food as they want, but ultimately that is going to our demise because it's not a natural holistic food that will ultimately kill us. Have you seen the population and the sickness and the overweightness, the obesity? Have you seen how we live our lives and how we live our lives based on this junk food? Well, when you take the farm and you take the water from the farm that grows the food, then it puts you in a place where you're doing more processed garbage food, which makes for a population that stays sick, that stays overweight, that stays lackadaisical and lazy. Is that all the big plan? Idaho farmer says water curtailment order will dry up land. It will push these farmers out of business. Faced with water curtailment issued, ordered last week, 3rd generation Idaho farmer isn't just thinking about preparing for cutting alfalfa, anxiously awaiting a wheat to flower. Now think about that. This farmer's not able to cut his land because he's worried that he's not gonna have enough water. Because in their areas, there's a lot of water. However, wheat and alfalfa grow real well. You know what I feed my dairy cows every morning when they eat? Alfalfa. I can't grow it here, so that's one of the only things that I purchase off farm. Now, can I feed them something else like other grasses? Yeah, but I use that alfalfa because it's good for dairy animals. We're not talking about the H5N1, how that's already hurting the dairy industry. We're not talking about the fact of all the other wars on the food industry. We're talking about this one right here. They're going right after the farmer. When you take water away from the farm, it will not allow vegetation to grow and it will shut down businesses. But more than that, think of how much wheat, barley, think of corn, think of alfalfa, think of soybeans, think of all the things that we grow. if they have no water, if the farmers cannot grow that, how do you honestly believe that you can feed your family? Are you a sustainable farm? Are you growing 20 hog in a pasture here? Are you growing 25 head of cattle over here and raising 5 steer a year? Are you raising 15,000 square foot of gardens? No, a lot of people are not doing that. So if we depend on the farmer, and government says, well, no, we're stopping the water because you're using too much. It's against, you know, we're in a drought. The climate issues, you can't use that much water. Going back to this farm, this is a gentleman named Mr. Young. It says, unless this emergency stay to the curtailment order, Young said the water will be shut off. Meanwhile, the crops that are already in the ground, Young has already invested seed, fertilizer, and other inputs. And he said, that's going to cost me $400 an acre of loss. He owns 2,700 acres. Now you think about that, how much money that is that he invested to feed you. Now remember, he is doing this. He can't eat 2,700 acres. He's doing this to feed livestock. He's doing this to feed America. This is what farmers do each and every day. They work 7 days a week to feed America. If the water is shut off, Young said that would mean that there will be a total loss of this year's wheat. We're already seeing a wheat problem because of Ukraine. And then barley crop too. He also expects that there will be 1 cutting of alfalfa instead of 3 that he hoped for. It's kind of like me last year with hay. We only got 1 cutting, and that put us in a very tight spot because of our little drought that we had. Now, we still had running water, we still had gardens growing, but we lost a pine thicket that so far has cost me 15 grand just to cut that I've lost. That's not counting the loss of revenue it would have cost me years in advance. When they grew, that cost me $15,000 just to clean up the mess that y'all saw in the pig forest and then across over there on the other side. Now, that's not woe is me, but that's saying as farmers, we depend on water necessity. We depend on growing the food. Now, I'm just a homesteader, so I'm not growing for the rest of everyone in America, but this guy is. So he has invested this much money, and now the government's saying, well, we've got less water for you as a farmer to utilize. Being done for this year means absorbing several $1 million of loss in this year's crop, and we don't recover from that. Young said in a phone interview, that would spell out the end of our business and the end of farming that we've been doing this for generations upon generations. Young is among eastern Idaho and Magic Valley family farmers and other water users that hold 6,400 groundwater rights that's subject to curtailment. Now this is the part it blows my mind. More than property tax. I cannot stand property tax. But to tell me that the government owns the water that's falling out of the sky, the creeks, the rivers, the lakes that's been there longer than they've been alive, to say that they have the rights to that blows my mind. I get so ill about that. I've heard several states saying, well, before you dig a pond, before you dig a creek, or before you make a new little basin, you have to call us, the government, to make sure that's okay. All the while, back in 1776, our forefathers got mad over a 2% tax on tea. And here we are paying 40% tax of our money, depending on all the taxes that you're paying. And then they have the rights to all your land because of taxes and because of regulation. That blows my mind. So, first of all, if I put the money into the property and I dig the well, God is the one who's letting it rain from the heavens. Remember, it says biblically that he can stop the rain or start the rain. Remember the times of Elijah, remember the times of Noah. Why do we believe the government has the rights of what water falls? People say, oh, government's not doing that. Yes, they are. You can't water catch in about 5 to 7 states, if I'm not mistaken. You cannot catch water off your own roof that you paid for, with the gutters that you paid for, with the rain system and the filtration you paid for. They won't allow you to do it. How is that right? How have we gotten to that point? That blows my mind. I'm serious. I get to a point where I get very upset because I'm thinking, there's no way that people can live without food. There's no food if the farmer cannot grow it. There's no farm if the farmer cannot make it by growing the crop. So if this farm goes out and 6,400 other people that are using that same water right, what if all those farms go out of business? What if half those farms go out of business? Ukraine wheat issue is already happening. What if all of a sudden your flour costs you $15 to $20 a pound instead of $4 or $5 a pound at Walmart? Now, you think it can't get that bad. It will get that bad if you take the farmers out. The reason people grow the grains, it's not just for you to eat your flour and your bread. It's also for to feed the livestock, to feed the chickens, the cows, the pigs, the sheep. Without that, you have no life-sustaining measure. So not only is water giving us everything that we need, as in cessation and making sure that we're staying alive and our body needs it, it allows us to be able to eat our food. What about that big patch of corn, or what about that big patch of butter beans or lima beans or tomatoes I have? Without water falling on it or me being able to get water to it, they all die. So that year's worth of food that I planned for my family, it's gone because there's a curtailment. What's our curtailment? Government overreach into your rights to have water. Is water a right? Is it a freedom? Oh no, you have to pay for it. Oh, that's just really another tax. Water rights. Oh wait, no, even if you pay for it, I'm still gonna hold you back because I don't believe we need to drain our aquifer that much. Well, the sad thing is, if you're not putting up water, stockpiling water, you better. If you're not in these areas, if you're in these desert areas, for one thing, like this kind of the plains area where they don't have a lot of water, I could not imagine living where you live. But more than that, if you live in Nevada and Nevada and parts of Colorado and Wyoming, and then you live up in Idaho, California, Arizona, New Mexico, if you're not putting up a lot of water, you could be in a very big bind. If you're not migrating to another state, you better be figuring out, if you don't have laws against water catchment, under that barn that we were just talking about, I don't tell people this. I hate that I shouldn't have told you this, but under that barn, I've got a lot of containers that hold water. Why? Just in case. It's an emergency insurance. Why do I have what they call water storage stockpile bricks in my house? Just in case. It's an emergency. Why do I make sure that my lake is always stocked with fish? But more than that, I want to make sure that it's always got a good dam on it, so therefore I don't lose the right to have the water. Why do we make sure that creek is always cleared out and we don't allow cows to stay in the creek? Because we want to make sure that that water is always flowing. You take people's rights away with water. Not only are you hurting the person, you're hurting the farmer. The farmer is the one feeding America. Without that, who feeds America? I can think of a few people, a few billionaires that's made this kind of weird processed meat. I can think of a few people that's grown in petri dishes chicken. I can think of a few billionaire companies that have grown certain style crops that does not need a lot of water because they've modified the seeds so much, so therefore they can grow it in these zones. You don't believe it's happening right before your eyes. When the government starts curtailing your water, curtailing the farmer's water, that's a problem. And here's the blowback I get. Well, Colby, they don't have a lot of rain. I mean, what are they going to do? They got to have the water. True. But here's the problem. I've went to Tennessee, I've went to Colorado, I've went to several places where the Army Corps of Engineers, they dam up certain reservoirs. They stop the natural flow of waters to do certain things for energy or so forth. Then we go to certain places and they slough off their crops and they cut their grasses out and they cut their trees out. And what they do is they put solar farms, so therefore there's no way that there can be naturally grazed earth, that it naturally regenerative, and that it naturally provides good topsoil and good compost and good worms to give back to the moisture of the ground where it doesn't need a lot. I've been places where most farms, they're tilling and they're putting all these amendments in, kind of like these farmers. And again, I'm not for all these crazy fertilizers they're using. The sad thing is they have to use them because if they don't grow enough crop, they make no money. If they're not growing crops, they're not making money. You're not eating because you're not growing your own either. I've told you before, I'm growing gardens and I grow them organically. And I grow them in the same places where I don't like to use a lot of implements. The purpose is because I want to make the soil so rich and so nutrient dense and so fertile that it doesn't need me overhead watering all the time. So a few gardens I've not even had to water really at all this year. Some I had to because they're newer. But the whole purpose of what we're saying is if we learn to go back to the olden ways to figure out how to make sure water is caught, make sure when the water falls that we're doing all we can to utilize it, not just letting it go to waste. Also not cutting our trees, not cutting our lands to put all this fake man-made stuff there, to cut down on waterways because we want to put a new industrial park here instead of catching water. A lot of our problem comes back to the government overreach that causes us to curtail our water. They're the ones that caused the problem in the first place. There should be no reason that a government body, a three-layer agency comes to your land and tells you where you can or can't put a body of water, where you can or can't catch water. That blows my mind. And if you live in those areas, you better find a new place to live. If you don't, you better fight it, fight it, fight it. Get with everyone in those towns and those cities, and you push against your local officials. Don't worry about the president right now. You worry about the board of aldermen. You worry about your city board. You worry about your supervisory board. You worry about your councilman. Whatever it is that's overregulating you, you go and you're there every day in protest. Because if you don't, and we lose the rights to having water, that is a problem. Now, in the city where people have to get water pumped in their homes, I really have no problem them paying for water because of the situations they're in. I wouldn't live in the city, but you're kind of in that situation, I understand. But when rural land has water, when it rains, it's not the government's water. And we've got to get away from this over-regulation. This land, if I paid for it, and I did, why do I have to pay property tax? Why do I have to worry what the government says on my own land? That's like this easement. You're sitting right under another easement I hate. I have an energy line that's been here since, way before I was, even before I was born, that was running through this property. It's stressed. I get so mad, I lock every gate up and make them call me when they come in. Because we are allowing too much easements, too much overreach, and too much government in our lives. And again, we're good at bickering about it, but we're not willing to do anything about it. Speak out. Talk about this. It's unfair to these farmers in Idaho, but this has happened in California, Colorado, New Mexico. This has happened in Wyoming. This happened in Oregon. Oregon just had this case a few months ago. Why is it the government's right to take your right away from having water? When they take the farmer away from having water, they take your food away, which is going to make the rest of the food that you see skyrocket. And if you're not growing your food, you're always dependent on then the next billionaire to come up with this cool new impossible meat concoction or this cool new genetically modified corn because you're at their beck and call. Don't be that person. Prepare now. Buy water, stockpile water, catch water, find ways to hold water. I don't care if you build a kiddie pool and build a big pool and you call it a swimming hole. It's water. And it's the way that we can live our life and know that we have it. Let me know your thoughts. God bless.